Welcome to the MIT PK-12 Network Welcome Webinar. This is the first webinar in our series, and we're excited to have you all join us here today. I just want to highlight that we will have about a 40-minute presentation, and then I welcome questions from the community. You can submit your questions in the group chat, so you'll find that chat option at the bottom of the screen. I can see that people are beginning to, say hello here in the chat box. So I welcome you to continue the conversation there, and then we'll take questions at the end. So first, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Dr. Lana Cook. I am a Leadership Giving and Strategic Initiatives Officer within MIT Open Learning. MIT Open Learning is located within MIT. We are MIT's kind of virtual home to the world. We open up campus curriculum, pedagogy, teaching and learning opportunities to learners around the world through online and blended learning options. So you might be familiar with MITx, OpenCourseware, the MicroMasters program or boot camps programs. So those are housed within our office. We also support the MIT PK-12 Action Group, which we'll be speaking about today, and that I'm excited to share some opportunities with you all today. In today's session, I just want to quickly cover the agenda. So first I want to cover kind of what we're hearing from alumni, from friends of MIT, from parents and students. We've seen a lot of interest in MIT's PK-12 community, and we really want to find new opportunities for people to get involved, whether that's on campus, online, or in their local communities. I'll give an overview of the general PK-12 landscape at MIT and call out a few of the highlights that we see across this community, and really highlight some ways for you to get involved, whether that is through your work as educators, as mentors or volunteers within your communities, or as parents, or perhaps as students yourselves, and certainly in supporting young students in your communities. I'll give a preview of upcoming episodes in this webinar series. This is meant to really just be the first in welcoming you to this community and hearing from you about ways, what you're interested in, what you want to learn, how do you want to get involved, and then this will be an ongoing series where we'll highlight, different programs across PK-12 at MIT. And we'll close with a preview of a convening that we're organizing for this fall, September 2020, where we hope to gather a community in person. So in addition to connecting online, what can we build together as a community in person? And then we'll close with time for your questions, comments, ideas, and I'm really excited to hear from you all. So first I wanted to start with what we're hearing from alumni, and MIT's PK-12 activities have been going on for decades now, and many of you might have been engaged in different kinds of programs, whether as an undergrad or graduate student yourself at MIT, or in your relationship as an alumni or as parents. But more recently, we've begun to really do some work with both the Alumni Association, with alumni communities, and hearing, what is the community looking for, and engaging with MIT's PK-12 opportunities. And we're hearing a couple of kind of key themes that I wanted just to highlight, and what we really hope to do with this webinar series is to begin to find more opportunities to respond to these kinds of requests and these ideas, because we really would love to see alumni and friends of MIT. This series is not limited to alumni, but really anyone who's interested in engaging with MIT's PK-12 world. So one thing we hear time and time again is really how to support MIT's K-12 programs in their local schools through, for example, through alumni club activities. And there's many alumni clubs, both domestically and internationally, that have strong K-12 volunteerism, and we're so excited to hear more from those clubs and to even feature them on this webinar series. But then for others who might not have engaged with their alumni club in the past within K-12, or would like to start up activities, we're interested in how do we support that? And so that will be one of the things that we'll cover in this webinar series. Another is, and this, I love this question, can alumni be ambassadors for bringing a new learning experience to children? And we think absolutely. And that is, I think, one of the main ways that we can see alumni and friends of MIT engaging with our PK-12 community is really being ambassadors, bringing our programming out to their communities, whether that's in local classrooms, informal learning settings, to their own homes. And so related to that is, volunteerism within their local classrooms and taking learnings from MIT back to their communities. And here I think we also want to emphasize the research component of what we do. So in addition to kind of the curriculum and educator resources that I'll highlight later in this webinar, we are also a home for robust research within pre-K through 12 learning. And that is a place I think in particular that we can also see alumni and friends of MIT bringing that research back into their communities and thinking about how that gets implemented and shapes, classroom and informal learning instruction. And then finally, and these comments are kind of not meant to be comprehensive, but just representative, an alum pointed out that some alums are entrepreneurs in this area, in addition to being educators in K-12, but are actually entrepreneurs and are building innovative products and businesses, technologies in this space. And so I think we're really interested in opening up opportunities for alumni to bring their talents to bear and collaborate with some of the communities that are here at MIT. So first I wanted to start with kind of the landscape of PK-12 and something we're also kind of hearing from alumni and friends. There's a lot of programming across MIT. I mean, I think we're really blessed in the diversity of programs that have come out really grassroots out of MIT's many departments, labs, and centers. And it's an exciting landscape of informal and formal learning programs, from sort of summer residential programs to online activities to activities that are happening with alumni clubs. And so this array of logos represents just really a slice of MIT's PK-12 community. In a slide I'll follow, we'll talk about the institute-wide task force on the future of MIT education, where we did a real comprehensive survey of the K-12 landscape at MIT and found that there was over 40 programs with over 100 activities across PK-12 at MIT, but part of the challenge is that not everybody maybe knew about all of these programs or knew how to get involved. And in recent years, the PK-12 Action Group and different offices across campus have done a great deal of work in trying to make many of these programs much more visible to alumni and to the public. And we're continuing that work. And that's something that we really hope this webinar series achieves, is making you more aware of, how do I get involved in these programs, whether for my student or my child, as an educator, or for people within my community, or as a volunteer. And so we'd like to highlight some of those opportunities today. I'd like to start with the kind of forming of the MIT PK-12 Action Group and our charge. So as I mentioned, that institute-wide task force on the future of MIT education, which was completed in 2014 and conducted by faculty, researchers, and staff across the institute, led by the vision of President Raphael Reif, put out a couple of charges for MIT Open Learning, led by Vice President for Open Learning Sanjay Sarma, to form the PK-12 Action Group with the charge to, and this is very MIT, and in terms of our ambition, reinvent education for all. So the idea being, that MIT, a leader in undergraduate and graduate education, very much can also be a leader and is a leader in the space of K-12 education as well, and really seeing that continuum of learning from our youngest learners to lifelong learning, and seeing, the kinds of innovation that we're doing in pedagogy and digital learning and kind of hands-on approaches to learning equally apply to the K-12 space. And so how do we bring that to bear to these kinds of classrooms and informal learning settings? One of the kind of key priorities there is really in integrating STEM education or STEAM education, if we add the arts, which we also see as critically important here, really worldwide, so both domestically and globally at that pre-K through 12 level. And then really importantly, to accomplish those two really ambitious visions is to really define a K-12 strategy for the Institute. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of years, is a real convening of this community, how to help support many of the groups that are across campus and bring more visibility to them, both from a fundraising perspective, from volunteerism to student engagement, and to their outreach and communications to better kind of leverage, but also how do we work together, breaking down our silos, working collaboratively as a community. And there's been some great leadership in that space across our community. I wanted to just highlight, what makes MIT's PK-12 efforts unique. And this is something that also surfaced in that task force on the future of MIT education, and that we've been doing a lot of thinking about here over those last years. One of I think the key things is MIT's mens et manus approach to learning, that we very much, imbues the spirit of PK-12 at MIT. That kind of really hands-on, minds-on, active learning. We really believe in, in a constructionist approach where kids are creating real-world solutions to real problems within their communities, and in the act of creation, are learning and testing their own kind of knowledges, skills, understandings of the world. We really believe in an evidence base to what we do, that research coming out of groups like the MIT Integrated Learning Initiative, mightily out of, from neuroscience and cognitive science research to the work that groups like Parag Pathak's School Effectiveness and Inequality Initiative are doing, in the economics of school choice, that these really should inform the way that we're approaching effective classroom design, the development of educational technologies, the way that we sort of scaffold learning for students, the way we design curriculum, the way we approach teacher education, that there's this evidence base that informs how we design these opportunities, as well as researching the effectiveness of our programs themselves. And so that real kind of virtuous cycle of research is critically important to MIT. We have a real entrepreneurial spirit here, believing in that, spark of invention and of creativity, and a can-do attitude of, what can I create within my community, and how do we light that spark, within our youngest learners. Another thing that we see as critically important is that kind of flexibility that we offer both educators, students, parents, that curriculum, isn't one size fit all, that it's also, how do we create kind of different modules or opportunities for people to kind of plug and play with our resources. So whether that's here's an after school, 1 hour activity, to a 2-week-long teacher education workshop, to a 6-week online course, is providing really flexible opportunities for people to engage with our content. Accessibility is also a major priority for us, both accessibility in terms of how do people access content online, openly and freely available, or to affordable programs, but also thinking about accessibility in terms of equity and inclusion, that all voices are heard and feel represented within our communities. And so that very much is a priority, and we'll highlight some of those efforts in this webinar series. And then finally, we're really thinking about scale and recognizing the real kind of vastness of the challenge of K-12 education, both in the US and globally. And, what is it going to take to help really reach so many of the learners that we see as either kind of falling behind, missing opportunities, or even out of school because of issues of displacement, whether that's due to politics or climate change, that we see K-12 as a real pressing issue of our time. And so really thinking about scalable solutions. And that's another place where we really invite alumni partners to the table, because we think that this is a problem that MIT as a community really can swarm to. And here I just want to highlight a photo in larger of the excitement that our K-12 activities bring. So this is our PK-12 Action Group Coordinator, Joe Diaz, leading an activity that we piloted in a STEAM summer camp in Hong Kong. And this was we did a test in a local Massachusetts school before we had that camp. And so just seeing the kind of looks on both the kids and the educators' faces in this activity, and Joe in a future episode will talk to you more about what they're doing there. So I want to highlight a couple key pillars that the PK-12 Action Group has been organizing itself around, and that I'll highlight today as kind of opportunities for you to engage as students, as parents, as educators. So curriculum, technologies and tools, courses and programs, physical spaces, and research. And so we'll go over each of these in some more detail. So first, starting with curriculum. So as I mentioned, we develop a great deal of curriculum in kind of different modules and activities, different types of forms or modalities. And this is curriculum across the disciplines. So certainly a STEM focus, but I think we really have a great deal of STEAM or arts and humanities curriculum as well. And this is coming out of MIT's many departments, labs, and centers as they've done different kinds of community outreach. And so what we've begun doing is really curating and making that curriculum more available to the community. And we're excited to share those activities with you and become more in dialogue about how our alumni and friends of MIT implementing these within their communities. So just a few, and I'll note that this welcome webinar is meant to give a quick overview and is not comprehensive. So there's many activities and programs across the Institute that might not be mentioned here today, but will be mentioned and highlighted in future episodes. So I really hope that you stay tuned with us for future episodes. So some places I'd like to highlight is the Abdul Latif Jameel World Education Lab. So on their portal, you can find a number of their STEAM camp curriculum activities. And these are great for informal learning settings, implementing within your local community, or even doing at home. And so after this webinar, I'll be sharing the recording of this session, as well as a number of links where you can find all of these activities. Next, I'd like to highlight Beaverworks, and I'll highlight their kind of programming, but that they also have an online course where you can see a lot of their curriculum and activity modules. The Edgerton Center, which has a number of maker education resources, so how to set up maker spaces, how to do maker activities, again, ranging from a shorter 1-hour activity to longer multi-day activities. So really kind of plug and play. And the same with Lemelson MIT, and I'll highlight on the next slide, one of their activity guides. So here, this chill out activity guide leads educators and students through creative applications of heat and heat transfer. And so here you can see that kind of real emphasis on STEM education with, similarly MIT's emphasis on, invention, on entrepreneurship, on creation that mends at Manus. And so I invite you to check out guides like these. Next, I want to highlight technologies and tools. So we have many kind of games, simulations, tools for young people to play with and explore different STEM subjects. One that I'll highlight here is Shadow Spec from the Playful Journey Lab and Education Arcade. This is a game that tests kids' geometry skills, so both as a way of learning geometry, but also has embedded assessments, so that as the student is engaging with this geometry game, they can begin to, both as a student themselves, but also their educator or mentor or parent, can also look at, how are they learning particular concepts? Where are they being challenged by particular geometry concepts? And how do we then support students in that next phase? So it's really, combining both play, practice, and assessment, which I think is very different than how we typically think of assessment as, sort of straight testing or quizzing, often after the fact, after we've learned. And so this is, how do we bring those more closely together? Some other tools that I'll highlight and technologies I'll highlight are different programming environments, like Scratch, for young learners, or Scratch Junior, really block-based coding environments where kids can create different kinds of projects, share those with a wider community, but learn the fundamentals of coding. There's also App Inventor for slightly older, middle school to high school kids, to even adult learners, of creating drag and drop block-based coding apps that then they can, deliver in, real world settings. And so we have extraordinary examples of students and teams using App Inventor to create apps that, address real challenges in the community, how to find or source, drinkable water, within places where access to such water might be, very difficult, to, how to help elderly patients with dementia to remember to take their medication. And so this is a place where we see, these tools and activities not as just simply games or sides, but really around like how to engage with their real world communities. Another is Star Logo, which is really around simulating different kinds of both, biological kind of simulations and scenarios. And so that's, kind of a more advanced tool for high school students. I want to highlight some courses and programs for students. And so here we have some on-site MIT courses and programs, some of which have some upcoming deadlines. And so with today's webinar, we actually have a lot of upcoming deadlines in this spring. And so that's where I wanted to take a moment just to highlight a few of those. So we have Spark for grades 7 through 8, which runs the weekend of March 14th, and registration will be opening up shortly later this spring. Bo STEM Academy, which is for rising 10th and 11th graders in Greater Boston, serving first generation and underrepresented communities. And that application will also be opening shortly with a program from July 6th to August 14th. And then the Lemelson MIT program, which I'll share some dates in the follow-up links as well. One program that I also really want to highlight here is the MIT office, or a number of programs, the Office of Engineering Outreach programs, which again also have upcoming deadlines, which we'll share in the follow-up. So we have the MITES program, and MOSTEC, which are both for 11th grade. MITES is an intense 6-week program, residential program, where students take academically rigorous course in math, science, humanities, and then have a number of mentorship and networking opportunities with the MIT community. MOSTEC, which grew out of MITES, is an online program that lasts 6 months and includes a 5-day conference at MIT. So students here have a real kind of immersive, kind of embedded experience, with both online and, within their home communities, engaging with this both academic content and then that mentorship, and then come to MIT for that residential experience, that networking, and receive a lot of support with the Office of Engineering Outreach programs. These programs are really designed to help, recruit and support diverse students coming into MIT. And so if you have students or people, students within your communities that you think would be interested or eligible for these programs, we invite you to reach out. Another program I'd like to highlight is the Beaverworks program, which has a deadline coming up later this this February, or rather, sorry, this April. They have both a residential program that's about a week long, and then you'll see some of the subjects here below where students will have real hands-on courses in creating race cars, autonomous vehicles, building CubeSats, engaging with AI for data science and health and medicine. And then finally, and this is a deadline of today, so I'll highlight that, the Women's Technology Program. And so this is a rigorous 4-week summer residential program for girls after their 11th grade year, so entering into their 12th grade year, to have a residential experience really in that kind of hands-on learning with MIT projects, faculty and undergraduates, mentors across campus, and have that kind of team-based experience. Another program that I'll highlight for both students, for parents, for educators is the Cambridge Science Festival. So this year it's April 17th through 26th. I invite you to check out their website with a large menu of activities and events. There's usually around like 200 activities across Cambridge that are free and open to the community. And that's a really exciting time if you're not local to visit campus. And so if you do visit campus during that time, let us know because we'd love to connect while you're here. I now want to switch to courses and programs for educators. And I want to highlight that, well, some of these programs for educators are for, kind of K-12 full-time K-12 educators who are working within classrooms. We really define educators broadly. So that could be people who are mentors, volunteers, to parents, who see themselves taking an education hat, certainly with their young children. So while some of these opportunities are certainly for kind of formal classroom teachers, many of these, especially in the online courses, are really for anybody. And so here I have listed some courses that we have on MITx and edX, on OpenCourseWare, which is really a kind of library of curriculum and resources, courses that we feature from the Teaching Systems Lab and the Education Arcade on educational technology and the future of teaching practice, to learning the kinds of coding environments and how to support young coders through the use of Scratch. And so an online course out of the Lifelong Kindergarten group. One I'd like to just kind of deep dive in is MITx. And so here with MITx, we have courses on EdTech and the use of educational games. We have courses on teaching practice. And so one I want to highlight, because it's the start date is coming soon, is Launching Innovation in Schools. And so this is taught by Professor Justin Reich of the Teaching Systems Lab and Peter Senge, who works with MIT JWL here within Open Learning on systems leadership, particularly with a focus on schools. And so that start date is February 4th, 2020. You can sign up at MITx on edX, and I'll send the link as the follow-up. The course is open to anyone to enroll and is free to audit, and with a small fee to earn a certificate if you so choose. We also highlight the kind of opportunities that we have for young students, or for kind of older students, high school students in particular, that might also be of interest to educators, is they look at how to both supplement course material within their classrooms, or to, as a parent, to take a course alongside your students. So we have examples of alumni taking a class, an MITx course with their high school student sort of side by side, which can be a really interesting experience, of a course that you might have taken as an undergrad, but that now your young student is interested in pursuing, and what kind of updates do you see in the course in its digital environment. So some courses that we have at the advanced high school level, you can find, a kind of curated group on onlinecourses.mit.edu. In particular, we have courses in biology, computer science, and physics. We also have a few courses that follow the AP curriculum in microeconomics and a series on calculus. A program that we have for K-12 teachers is the Science and Engineering Program for Teachers, SEPT. This year, we'll be accepting up to 60 educators from secondary schools worldwide with a focus in STEM subjects. The deadline is fast approaching, so the February 17th. So I'll have you, be mindful of that as you look at this program, and if you're interested in applying or nominating a teacher to apply from your community. SEPT has recently grown to include a number of tracks in particular areas that we see as crucial to K-12 practice. And so here I think it also highlights how MIT is approaching K-12 education. And so the three tracks here: broadening participation in STEM for girls and underrepresented minorities, bringing project-based learning and inquiry into STEM classrooms, and then the use and design of games and simulations within K-12 education. The Edgerton Center, as I mentioned, has a number of resources on maker education and has begun a series of workshops for educators in these spaces. So these are residential workshops, many of which are one day, and a few span multiple days depending on the subject, and I'll send links to where you can find more to register. But here we highlight, some of the kind of key topics of areas. So design and operate a makerspace with shop tool training, physical computing with Arduino, making with music, to even master making in the classroom. And so that's one of their kind of more intensive multi-day series for people who are really interested in kind of getting that mastery level makerspace into their practice. And then I'd like to highlight just the physical spaces that we have here on campus. So some of the opportunities I've highlighted are both our kind of online programming as well as kind of short residential experiences. But then we also, MIT opens its campus to the community. So we have spaces like the technology-enabled active learning classroom, which is a real kind of innovative space in terms of classroom design, and then we invite educators to come and tour as they think about how to create new kinds of learning spaces within their schools. We have maker spaces like the Edgerton Center that you can come and visit and set up times with the maker educators to really kind of learn about how to set up spaces like that. And again, I'll highlight Edgerton's excellent resources on makerspace. And you'll get the link shortly. And then finally, I want to emphasize the research that we're doing across K through 12 education. So here's a list of just a few of the labs that are doing research in cognitive neuroscience to online learning, to the economics of charter schools and school assignment systems, to teacher practice and teacher rehearsal, to the future of assessments. One program I'll highlight is Look It, the online child lab. And so this is a place where we're looking for volunteers and research participants, particularly for really younger kids. So this is 0 to 3 to even a little older, and understanding that often really young children are not making it into sort of research labs at MIT, but there's enormous amount of things that we are interested in studying and learning about early childhood development as the real foundation of all of education. And so we invite you, if you have little ones or know people who have little ones, to check out Look It. And there's a number of different kinds of experiments that are fun to do with your young ones. And then finally, I'll just highlight two kind of resources that collect a lot, all this information. The pk12.mit.edu, where you find updates about this webinar series, as well as outreach.mit.edu, where you can find different opportunities of events on campus, the kinds of workshops that I've mentioned here today, as well as other kinds of opportunities to learn and engage with the community. And then finally, I wanted to talk about, what's next, what's upcoming. So our next webinar will be on March 18th on STEAM curriculum. So there we'll really deep dive into how MIT approaches STEM education, as well as where you can find and how do you engage with some of the curriculum modules that we have available. And then on May 20th, we'll talk about local community engagement with Rohan Kondargi from MIT Government and Community Relations. And so we'll talk here about both, how does MIT, engage with the Cambridge and Greater Boston community, but also what are the kinds of best practices for you engaging with your local community, whether that is as a parent, an educator, a volunteer, as a policy advocate. Many of you might serve on PTAs or school boards or school committees. And so we want to have a conversation about, what is the best way to work with your local community and educators? What are some successes that we've seen? What are some interesting models that MIT is incubating today? And so for the schedule and past recordings, you can visit the pk12.mit.edu/network. And then finally, as we're engaging with you online and hopefully continuing the conversation, in between these webinars, we want to also bring you to campus. And so we are planning an event in parallel with the Alumni Leadership Conference that's hosted every year at MIT. So September 2020, and we'll share the date as soon as that's available, for a 1 to 2 day training workshop and summit. And so here we'll get really hands-on, roll up our sleeves on running activities in your school, really equipping you with the tools and knowledges that you need to take this curriculum and run your own programs, to discussions and best practices of volunteerism and mentoring, policy and advocacy, as well as to, also connect you more, more with the programs across MIT, particularly if there's places like, we talked at the beginning, entrepreneurs or researchers or people who have different skill sets and want to become part of the kind of program teams. So doing that kind of networking and matchmaking. We're seeking a dedicated team of alumni and friends to join the planning committee for this event. And so if you're interested, I'd love to hear from you. So contact us at pk12network@mit.edu to learn more about how you might be engaged in planning that convening. And so I'll just highlight the next webinar on March 18th, 2020 at 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. But now really I want to hear from you. So what are your questions? What are your ideas, suggestions as you hear about MIT's PK-12 community and how you might get involved? So I'll remind you to check the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And thank you to my colleagues for sharing different links and resources to upcoming opportunities with OEOP, with Lemos and MIT, as well as the task force on the future of MIT education. But I'd love to hear your questions. Great, thank you. So we have a question. Are there local chapters of pre-K through 12 network? So this is a great question. So through the Alumni Association, we have a number of alumni clubs that have kind of grassroots K through 12 activities. And so one of our roles here is to really get a better survey of those activities and to make those more visible to more people so that they might not be aware that within their community, of Los Angeles or San Francisco, within, DC, that there's kind of an active K-12 community. There's also the K-12, the STEM K-12 education alumni network. So that was a kind of loose affiliation of alumni who are interested in K-12 education. And so we've named this series in part to kind of echo or parallel that group, which again, I think has been kind of an informal sort of loose network. And we're trying to think about, how do we best support that community of people who've raised their hands of being really interested in K-12 education, but really maybe aren't sure how to get involved. And so that's a place where we would love to hear from you about what are the kinds of opportunities that you see within your community, within your alumni clubs, to get together, whether that's in person or online. Thank you, David. So there's a question, is there a dedicated group like Facebook where folks can share ideas and ask questions as they take this out to their community? Similar question as before, but online, I guess. I have found groups like this to be really helpful to get quick information in real time when the needs arise. So yes, so we will be posting updates on the PK-12 Action Group website and would love you to join that community. So we'll be sharing out a link to where you can find that community, and I think that is a place where especially, we'd love that, more of that connection. Annie, thank you. So I'll share this comment from Annie. For folks interested in getting engaged in MITE's MOSTEC or SEED, they're currently accepting staff applications for all 3 programs. So if you'd like to learn more about how to become involved as staff in these programs, I think that's a really excellent opportunity. I'd love to hear from people, just to give people a prompt as we are thinking of questions. What are the kind of pressing or burning issues you see in K-12 education? So what are the big challenges that you see MIT could respond to? As you're thinking, Megan's got a great question. If we don't have much time to volunteer, what are other ways we can support MIT's PK-12 programs? So one is, certainly making, your networks, whether that's fellow parents, educators, aware of these opportunities, that the curriculum that we have available, the online courses, so just kind of link sharing. But another really important way of supporting MIT's PK-12 program is through your giving. So supporting these programs financially, which are often on, very lean staff, with gifts to the PK-12 fund at MIT are really important ways to just help sustain this community, both as a larger kind of collaboration, but each individual program as well. So in my prompt about major challenges in education, Annie highlights, finding ways to make our outreach efforts equitable, to truly go out in our communities and provide meaningful opportunities for all kids. And this, I'll really echo and emphasize that the need to have really diverse voices and stakeholders as part of our programs, in our outreach, and in groups like these. And so, how to make sure that we are, reaching all kinds of learners across our communities, and being really creative in our outreach. And so that's a place where we'd especially like to get a group of alumni and friends of MIT around this really important issue. Another question is, what is MIT doing to apply the research to affect policy change? So this is a place where many of our faculty who do leading work in policy around school effectiveness and school reform are, are having conversations with both state and national policymakers. But that's a place where also we can see a real need for alumni involvement, that each of you have political influence within your own communities, sort of in local government and state government, and where you can help bring research to bear on that policy. And so that will be a feature of one of our upcoming episodes as well. Looking at some of these questions here. So Stephanie from MIT Lemelson offers, that they've offered expert testimony around closing the gender gap in patenting at the USPTO hearing. So if that's an example of how our programs are engaging in this policy space. Another question is, do we know of a place to collect kits and activities for reuse? So a lot of us get asked to participate in STEM days in schools, but I feel like out of these asks is, kind of, let me Google some activities I can bring and guide kids through. I'd be happy to contribute to such an activity repository if it existed. Excellent question. And so that's one of our kind of main tasks here at the PK-12 Action Group, is how to curate those activity guides that are across the Institute. So we will begin by just highlighting where these already exist in programs like Edgerton Center, Lemelson MIT, Beaver Works, but then really collecting them in one place for alumni. So that's something we're hearing from alumni and the public is, there's lots of stuff, but it's in a lot of different places. And so if we can make that kind of one space for you guys to really access, that would be a success for us. So we'd love to engage you as we're curating and collecting these resources to find what's most useful for you, in what kind of package or delivery, because and then also, of contributing to such an activity repository, that we really believe in iteration. And so if you can help us improve upon, extend, hack, contribute new ideas to this curriculum space, we'd love to have you involved. And so that's going to be one of the major topics of that in-person convening. And so similar, yeah, there's a resource site where we can see STEM activities from MIT for PK-12. So we'll begin sharing those out, but would love to hear your thoughts about how to make those more accessible to the needs that you have. So in closing, I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. I hope to hear from you for feedback about this webinar series, ideas for future webinars that we'll be hosting in March and in May, and then throughout the summer. And then certainly if you want to get involved in the organization of that convening. So thank you again for tuning in, and I hope you check out the links that we'll be sharing along with this recording. Take care and have a wonderful day.